Excellencies, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's great finally to be in the event of UONGOZI Institute, which is now heading towards its second term. And we have seen that there's a great potential for interaction and dealing with North-South issues. And let me also appreciate the presence of both the chairman and the director of the North-South Center, which I think is a very important strategic partner for the Finnish Foreign Ministry. I very much appreciated the wise words of President Mkapa when he was speaking about the necessity to free Africa from dependency. And I believe that this is also the aim and will of most development partners today. This is written into the Finnish development policy program, which is only roughly a year and a bit more old. We want our aid to end in freeing our partner countries from aid dependency. And it is very easy for us to align ourselves with the national development programs of countries which have set for themselves these target years. And I know that Tanzania has a very ambitious goal of becoming a middle-income country, and we want to help that with our aid, which has continued for more than 40 years. And also I believe it was important that President Mkapa was saying that decline of aid, if it is leading into more dependency, is a good thing. And I agree, I very much agree. And I also agree that if aid would have resulted, and if it would result in building 12,000 wells in 12,000 villages, that would be what ODA should be used for. Now, I think the theme of this session is to look for synergies and connections and contacts between the private sector and the development community and developing countries and companies coming from the north. And I think this is a time when it is possible to build what President Mkapa has called genuine partnerships. President, I would like to add, when you say PPP, why don't we say private, public, people, because that it would be the spirit of our delegation also from Finland today. We have private sector, we have public sector, and we have civil society. Because I do believe that by this type of partnerships, we would also get the true impact at grassroots level. Certainly, the prerequisite of such partnerships is indeed that all partners will bring something, and that there is, as President Mkapa has said, there is respect and confidence between the partners. And may I humbly say that why we feel that the long tradition between the Nordic countries and Tanzania and other East African countries is a fruitful one, is that we don't have any historical loads. And that's why we have been able to initiate discussions between Nordic governments and African like-minded governments. The next meeting of the foreign ministers will be in Finland in June, in the midnight sun. So I think if we manage to convert our aid relations to a healthy trade relation, it would add example to many more countries. There was this rather interesting question from the floor about what will the role of the growing input of the BRICS countries be on development in Africa. Let me try to answer. I know it's for the African countries themselves to answer, but I do sense that in some ways it may lead into a new kind of dependency, and I hope that the governments are wise enough to see in what way the inputs from the BRICS countries, notably from China, are really genuinely promoting development, which is inclusive, which gives possibilities for each member of this society, which is also green, which takes into account the absolute necessity to recognize the planetary boundaries today. I think corporate accountability has become a very important theme because there is just an instant from an action by an irresponsible government to the social media, which multiplies neglection and denial of human rights, environmental protection, labor rights. So I'm sure that corporate accountability is something that the companies and the civil society and also the government should intensely discuss among themselves. And I do belong to those who call for a binding global regulation on corporate accountability. I don't think it can only be charity. What is now being called corporate social responsibility for me is often just charity, sometimes very necessary if the government and the state is not able to provide schools and roads and healthcare, but it cannot be the ultimate responsibility of the companies. But the companies must see that they don't involve themselves in irresponsible exploitation of natural resources of this continent. Reading the recent African Progress Panel report, which was led by Kofi Annan, is very interesting indeed and illuminating, where we see that the potential of the natural resources in Africa is vast, but it also requires responsible behavior from the company side. It needs new kind of attention, international attention to illicit capital flows. By the way, I would like to invite you to look at how the European Council, which is the heads of state of the 27 EU member states yesterday, how they are committed now to the fight against illicit capital flows, notably, of course, in Europe, but also globally, because it cannot only be fought in Europe. And I'm very pleased to see that there is a notion on the global dimension and the development dimension of this important fight against tax evasion, illicit capital flows. It was impossible to imagine a year ago that there would be such a statement from the European Union at the top level coming, and now this has happened, and now it's important to see that all this will be implemented. Martin Khor has given some very sharp insights, and I would like to also to highlight his role in looking for a new consensus in the North-South Dialogue, which should aim at revising and complementing the Millennium Development Goals. I think that the North-South Centre could play a very, very important role here, also to evade some prejudiced ideas and misconceptions about what is now being called green economy. Because I do believe that green economy is something that is not just a plot by the rich North. It is also something that the whole planet needs to use natural resources sparingly, to produce new innovative solutions where companies have a big role to play. But I also believe that as a part of this deal, in the new development agenda post-2015, the rich countries have to revise and strengthen their commitments to development financing. I think the 0.7% is not dead. It should not be dead, because it is the least developed countries that really do need ODA for some years to come. And according to the Finnish development policy, we direct most of our development aid to the least developed countries, realizing that actually most of the poor people in the world live in middle-income countries like Brazil, India, and so on. But those governments are very capable of producing what Martin Khor has called social protection, cash transfers, and systems which also are necessary to give a place for the most vulnerable groups in the society. So this new deal, I think it has to be mutual, and I don't think we can have separate goals for development for developing countries on one hand and so-called developed countries on the other. I believe it has to be a universal agenda where we all have a role to play. So without such a new deal, I don't think we can get further in our attempts to alleviate and eradicate poverty from the world. and to face and answer to the global challenges such as combating climate change, which is already hurting so many poor people in the world, including in Africa. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I believe that the UONGOZI Institute has a great future in front of itself.